So every time you stare at a blown account, every time you say, I should be further down the road than I am right now. I should have been further along. I shouldn't be here. When we start to say things like that to ourselves, we reinforce a version of ourselves that we don't want to be, right? But what if the real breakthrough isn't found in trying to fix the past, but it's in following a future self so vivid and so compelling and so crystal, a future vision of ourselves that's so clear that it makes the limiting beliefs, and remember the limiting beliefs are a product of the past, it makes those limiting beliefs eradicate, it makes them irrelevant, because the clearer that future becomes, the more we focus on that, the more energy we put to that future vision, the quieter the noise gets, and I guess ultimately the faster and easier it is to align in the present. Miles, I don't know if you got any thoughts on that before we dive into it.
It's kind of powerful, you know? The idea of outrunning the past instead of like endlessly picking at it. It feels like a lot of people get stuck in that loop, the should haves and could haves. And it's exhausting, right? It's almost like the past has this gravitational pull and you got to build a rocket to get away from it. But focusing on a really compelling future, that's a different kind of energy. It's proactive. Does that make sense? It just feels less about fixing something broken and more about building something new.
Exactly. And most traders, and let's go with most people, you know, we get stuck in regret loops, right? Why did I do that?
Yeah, totally.
This always happens to me. Here we go again. And these beliefs, they feel like truth, and they become more true to us the more we repeat them, right? But they're just unchallenged memories in a way. And the moment we shift our focus away from the past as our identity source, we open up that room, we open up that space for expansion.
Right. It's like those stories we tell ourselves become the rules, and they kind of limit what we think is even possible. And you're right. It's not even that they're necessarily untrue at first. It's just we keep replaying them until they feel like solid fact, which is kind of messed up when you think about it. Like our brains are really good at making stuff up and then believing it. It's true.
Mm-hmm. And then there's also like there's also the thinking around making the future that much more vivid, because a lot of us, obviously, people do look to the future, but how much time they spend looking to the future and how much energy and focus they spend on making that future vision clear varies, right, from person to person. Vague futures don't make changes, right? It's the clear ones that do.
Totally.
So I think, what does it for the traders? What does your future self trade like? How would they trade today? How do they think? What do they avoid? What state of being are they actually in? And the focus should be then to try and get into that, get into those attributes sooner rather than later. Now, today.
So it's less about I need to stop doing X and more about I need to become someone who wouldn't even do X in the first place. It's like shifting the identity, not just changing the behavior. That's pretty clever, actually. It feels like a more sustainable approach too. Willpower only gets you so far.
Become the person that wouldn't do X in the first place.
Exactly.
And start doing Y, right?
Exactly. And it kind of flips the whole narrative. It's not about self-punishment for past mistakes. It's about self-creation. Building towards something makes a huge difference in how you look at things, I think. It reminds me a bit of that idea of, focusing on being a writer, not on writing a book. The writing happens more easily when the identity is in place.
Yeah, that's it. And also on the idea of making that future as clear as you possibly can, right? We want to eliminate the noise by choosing a clear path. So we really make that future version of ourselves vivid. So then things like, the market, the candlesticks in the traders world, the candlesticks, they just become noise. Social media becomes noise. Old identity loops all become noise. Elon Musk comes to mind. I know that might seem like a bit of a sharp tangent, but controversial figure, whether you love the guy or hate him or everything in between, one thing you've got to admit and give credit for is the fact that he's a visionary, right? And in terms of his projection of what is possible in the future, he aims, outside of the realms of quote unquote possibility, right? For himself as well. And it's almost like, in trying to attain the seemingly impossible, it forces you to eliminate the noise and optimize for that specific path. We're always going to optimize for something, right? We're always going to optimize towards a goal. You can optimize towards a lesser goal, or you can optimize towards, the greatest goal that your mind can imagine for a future version of yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And once you create that clear vision of what that future goal is going to be, you're forced then to optimize for that path. And like I mentioned, things like the social media and all that kind of stuff, they just dissipate. They're all noise, and you can see exactly what the signal is that you should be heading towards.
Right. It's like when you have that laser focus, the distractions just fade into the background. It's not even that you're actively ignoring them, it's that they just don't have the same pull. It reminds me of, and this might be a weird analogy, but if, when you're really engrossed in a good book, you don't even notice the sounds around you, You're completely absorbed. It's kind of the same principle. And you're right about Elon, too. Love him or hate him, you can't deny the guy has a vision. It's a big one. It kind of forces everything else to become irrelevant. Does that resonate?
Yeah. And I guess I can probably hear some people saying, well, the thing is, if you set those aggressive goals, what happens if you fail? And if you start thinking like that, then you've already failed already, right? But the idea is the grand goals that you're setting, these quote unquote impossible, seemingly impossible goals that you're setting, they're just a tool to force your present self to adapt and optimize and walk in that direction. And I've also heard about even being super let's say aggressive might be the wrong word, but let's go with it. Super aggressive with the goal that you set for yourself in the future, in that you're not only just setting a massive goal, whether it be, I want to get to Mars, what have you. I want to be, one of the top traders in the world. You're not only just setting that goal, you bring it forward in terms of the timeline as well. So rather than saying, I want to be the best trader in the world in 4 or 5 years time,
right?
You say, what do I want to be one of the best traders in the world in 1 year's time, 6 months time. Now, if you put that goal in front of you, it's staring you in the face. If you put that in front of you, then you would then, if it had been, you are then forced to optimize for that. And again, whether or not you hit that in that period of time or not doesn't matter. It's a tool to force the best version of you in the present to show up. And like you said with the book analogy, if that if that goal, if the story, if the goal is the book, or the final chapter of the book, then you in the present now, in chapter 1, are forced then to focus in and lock in and eliminate all the noise that happens outside of that book, so you can essentially get to the final chapter and reach the goal.
That's really well put. It's almost like shortening the timeline isn't about being unrealistic, it's about raising the stakes, and forcing a higher level of commitment. It's like if you give yourself a year to do something, you're going to approach it differently than if you give yourself 5. There's a sense of urgency that just forces you to prioritize. And you're right, the actual outcome almost becomes secondary to the process of becoming the person who could achieve that goal, which is kind of wild to think about. It's like the goal is less a destination and more a forge shaping you into something new.
Yeah, it's focus on becoming rather than focus on what you might get at the end. You know, if you start focusing on becoming, obviously you need to project to what that goal might be, so that some people might say, oh, you contradicted yourself, that is the end. Yeah, okay, cool, I get it. But once you've got that, you know, that impossible goal set, then you need to then focus on becoming everything that you need to become towards, you know, getting that. Because obviously we live in the present, right? The future, again, is just, you know, the idea of the future is just that tool that we use to shine a lens on ourselves so that we know that we're doing the right thing. We can self-correct and align in the present for, you know, for that trajectory. And the amazing thing about what we've spoken about here is, you know, again, even if you don't, even if it's just an endeavor to create and focus your energy on the future and use that as a tool, even if you just endeavor to do that, you're already better than the version of you that is dwelling on the past, right?
Absolutely.
You know, you've already broken out of that. So that's a win in itself. You know, just changing your orientation to be, I'm someone who dwells in the past. You know, as I said in the beginning, here we go again. You know, all of those negative things that you might say to yourself and all those things that, you know, that might surface from living in the past.
I was just going to say, it's kind of liberating, isn't it? Even just the attempt to shift focus. It's like, you don't even need to succeed to win. Just the act of trying pulls you out of that gravity well of regret. And yeah, you're right. That's a win in itself. Pretty significant one, actually. Does it feel like a shift, even just talking about it?
Yeah. So I kind of feel like there's a choice. It's almost like you can keep measuring your progress by how far you are from your past, or you can start measuring alignment with your future. And like we've said, the more vividly you see who you are becoming, the less noise you tolerate, the less noise you're willing to tolerate, and the fewer decisions you struggle with, right? And the faster you start showing up as the person you want to be, the trader that you want to be.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Measuring alignment instead of distance. It's like switching from subtraction to addition. And you're absolutely right. When the vision is clear, the decisions get easier. There's less friction. It just flows. It's almost like the future self is guiding the present self instead of the past self dragging you down.
So you got any closing thoughts then, and takeaways, just sort of rounding off the conversation in terms of what we discussed, and what some sort of key takeaways could be for people? I'll let you take the floor and sort of close the show.
Okay. Well, I think the biggest takeaway, and you articulated this brilliantly, is that trading and honestly life isn't really about fixing the past. It's about building a future self that wouldn't even create the problems you're trying to fix. And to do that, you need a really vivid vision of who that person is, and then just relentlessly optimize for becoming them. Let go of the regret loops, the should-haves, and focus on building momentum towards something bigger. It's less about willpower and more about identity. And don't be afraid to aim high, like ridiculously high. The point isn't necessarily to reach the goal, it's to become the person who could.